Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I wanted to spend just a few minutes chatting about Alberta and Western alienation and this desire, seemingly for 20 to 30 or 33% of Albertans to separate. I thought that Charles Saint-Anan puts it in a great perspective that economically it doesn't make a lot of sense, just like he thought that Brexit didn't make a lot of sense, just like he thought that Quebec separation was bad for the economy, even the threat of it for Quebec. And I could go on with lots of other separations. I never thought that the Mississauga idea of separation from Peel made a lot of economic sense, but it's one of these populist ideas that you're better off alone and you can make your own way. And that you don't have to listen to and or compromise with other parts of whatever the jurisdiction is that you're currently a part of. And I think it is ethnocentric and often myopic and wrong. But obviously, if 20 to 33% of the people think that way, and almost 50% in Quebec think that way, and over 50% of the people in England thought that way, it obviously is an opinion that you've got to listen to and you got to pay attention to and you got to wonder why. And I think there's a couple of reasons. I think, and I've talked about this, numerous times before, I think one of the problems is our governance system. I really believe that proportional representation or something like that, mixed member proportional representation or whatever it is, would go a long way to addressing some of the issues. The West doesn't feel in. And when they don't elect any MPs from a governing party and therefore left out of caucus or left out of the cabinet, I think that you feel that way. And I think there's a lot of liberal voters in Alberta and conservative voters in urban Toronto that feel completely alienated, even though they're a significant minority that voted that way. And if they had a voice, if they had representation, I think it would be different. I said this during the COVID lockdowns. I disagreed with what the trucker convoy was all about and what they were trying to achieve. But 15% of Canadians' population, supposedly, according to polls, supported what the trucker convoy was all about. And I do think that, frankly, some of the lockdowns went too far. I disagreed publicly about the lockdowns of parks and recreational facilities in Mississauga and Peel, because I think they were wrong. And they said, "Oh, we just locked down the parking lots," but it made it impossible for people to go out and walk. I think that locking down the high schools and the universities were wrong when young people were far less prevalent of getting the virus. And what we really need to do is a far better job protecting our seniors. And we robbed our young people of the opportunities for social interaction. Anyway, 15% of the Canadian population agreed with the trucker convoy and disagreed with the mask mandates or the vaccine mandates or the lockdowns or some portion thereof. And they needed to be listened to. And if they had a voice in Parliament, people would have potentially felt differently. They would have felt, at least we've been heard, but outvoted in the end. I think if there were Liberals elected in Alberta and they were in Parliament and they were in caucus and they were in cabinet, I think that Albertans would feel a little less unrepresentative. I think if, frankly, there were conservatives elected in urban Vancouver and urban Montreal, because a significant minority voted that way, and didn't end up having any MPs elected or very few MPs elected, they'd feel differently. I think that in the last provincial election, where the NDP got far fewer votes but got far more seats, that shows some of the mistakes of the first past the post. The fact that the Conservatives got 40-something% of the vote, but got 60 or 70% of the seats. There's something wrong with our system. Lots of people say, well, that's a way of ensuring that we have more continuity in government. We have majorities. It's easier to form a majority. Well, you know what? Compromise is challenging. Governing should be challenging. Creating coalitions and compromises and getting to the right answer in the end should be hard work, and we shouldn't make it easier. And so I think proportional representation is the way to go. I think that the West was arguing for a long period of time for a triple E Senate. And I think that maybe the Senate might be one of the first places you could get proportional representation. I do think that this appointment of independent senators has made the Senate less relevant. I'm not sure if it's actually helped. I wonder if electing a Senate via proportional representation and making it equal, maybe it's 25% Quebec, 25% Ontario, 25% the Maritimes, 24% the West, or approximately, maybe the West got to have a little bit more. I think that making the Senate elected, equal, and effective, and maybe elected by way of proportional representation might be a great way of ensuring that the West feels in. In addition, I do think that they feel alienated because of the lack of attention to pipelines. I'm frustrated by that because the federal government bought and paid for a significant pipeline. So I wonder why they feel so alienated. But I do think that the past prime minister's answer that there was no way to get liquefied natural gas to the coast and supply Europe, when obviously Australia's doing it and the US is doing it, it was clearly a mistake, and we should have found a way to do it. And we got to get those market prices for our Western energy. I do think we need to get another pipeline to the west coast of British Columbia. I'm not so sure about a pipeline across Canada because I think that is uneconomic. I have the privilege in my job of traveling to Saskatchewan, to Alberta, to British Columbia quite a lot, and on a fairly regular basis. I've got business interests there. I had an opportunity in a prior job to travel. I also have an opportunity to go to Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, etc. I had an opportunity in a prior job to make it to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, and really all the way through BC, because I worked and lived in British Columbia, and we went everywhere across BC. I think my experience is unique. I don't think there's a lot of people that get the opportunity to travel as much and as frequently across Canada and meet people and do business with people across Canada. And I think that's a shame. And I think that Canada would feel differently if we got an opportunity to travel more extensively across Canada. And I encourage Canadians to do that. And I really wonder about this idea that we had at one point in time about Katimavik. I think the Peace Corps in the United States really did a great job of bringing Americans together. I think the idea of Katimavik that Pierre Elliott Trudeau floated of having French and English, Easterners and Westerners, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, working together on projects of national public social interest and traveling across the country and experiencing different parts of the country makes a lot of sense. So I guess what I got to say is the West wants in isn't something we should go away from. We should recognize that there is a significant minority of Alberta that does feel alienated, and we got to find a way of more effectively making them feel included in our society, in our country, that they're listened to, they're heard, and not just say that economically it makes no sense. Because I think that's what we said in Quebec. I think that's what they said in the UK, and look what happened in the UK and how close it came in Quebec. And so let's not denigrate those separatists in Alberta. Let's listen to them. Let's address their concerns. Let's make them feel included. Let's try to change some of our governance and some of our infrastructure and some of our attitudes, particularly in the young people, such that we get to know each other far better. Anyway, that's Brian Crombie for the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. That's my show for tonight. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you long form interviews with really interesting people, and then also provide my points of view. Thanks. Good night.